the reality is that organic farming uses twice as much land to produce the same amount of produce. And so that
And more
doesn't sound better for the environment.
when it comes to organic, at least in the US, to be certified organic, there are certain pesticides you can't use, and they end up having to use other pesticides that are like certified for organic or whatever, right? But those don't necessarily always go through safety testing, and a lot of them turn out to be more harmful. Meanwhile, you look at any two fruits next to each other, one organic and the other not. The organic ones are like freakishly huge.
Okay, welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt. And, we'd love it if you'd like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, all the usual YouTube stuff. So, yeah.
I am Casey Rochford, and I'm sitting on my chair backwards because I'm fucking cool. And I'm also cool because I, as well as my associate here, Eric, write music. Do you do that? Well, if you do, it's not as cool as ours. So stick around to the end, and you'll hear how cool we are. Yeah. All right. Well, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, we were just kind of chit-chatting before recording this, and the topic of organic food came up, and I remembered that I was just reading in one of my friend's zines that he produces called Welcome to the Cultural Ether, that he had a little section in here talking about organic food myths. And I mean, we could probably start there and go on to some other things, but it's pretty fascinating stuff, and it's like things that people don't realize. Like a lot of things. I mean, we could even go into things like recycling too, which I know was kind of a topic that we had in our topic list, but like I think it's kind of related in a way, is like people thinking they're doing better for the world or themselves, the environment or something, when in fact the truth is completely different than what people believe it is.
Right.
So maybe we could just talk about in general things like that, where people have this perception of doing good when in fact it isn't.
I tell you what, like one of the things I'm really astounded by here in Germany is organic is a huge it's a huge corporate entity in America, which most people think quite the opposite, but here it's like it's really a thing. They call it BO, BIO. So BO everything. Like seriously, like there's probably 40% organic stuff. Like,
wow.
And I mean, like the thing that really rubs me the wrong way is it's like there's stuff like lotion. Like, why does that have to be organic? And then I shit you not, I'm on a German flight through Condor, and they give you a bottle of water, and it says it's organic,
which is a lie in multiple ways.
I hope it doesn't have carbon in it.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's like water is just water, right? I mean, sure, there could be different things in it, but I guess wouldn't organic water be spring water, right? Like naturally occurring water they just take out of the ground?
No matter what, it's not organic.
No.
Like, literally not organic ever.
That's what I was saying.
By definition of its entire constitution, it is not organic.
Yeah. hydrogen and oxygen, right? There's no carbon in there.
Yeah. So stuff like that just shows you're just being suckered into paying more for something.
Yeah. Which is that's what his little article here gets into, is that like essentially you're getting kind of the same stuff, and you're just paying a lot more, like a hell of a lot more in some cases. And he goes into some things about one of the myths actually that I found kind of interesting. So it's just, he lists a few things and then goes into detail about why it's a myth. And one is organic growing methods are better for the environment, which a lot of people believe. They think that, but the reality is that organic farming uses twice as much land to produce the same amount of produce. And so that doesn't sound better for the environment.
More pesticides and
which now, like, granted, there are certain, I mean, I in the US at least, maybe in other places it's different, but there are certain rules about what kinds of pesticides you can use. And in some ways I get that particular side of it. Like, okay, we try to use more or less nature's means of dealing with pests rather than a bunch of chemicals.
Here's the catch about that. When it comes to organic, at least in the US, to be certified organic, there are certain pesticides you can't use, and they end up having to use other pesticides that are like certified for organic or whatever, right? But those don't necessarily always go through safety testing, and a lot of them turn out to be more harmful. So it's like you could say that it's regulated, but it's kind of like a TSA sort of regulation. Like, we'll check like every 100 bags, and probably a terrorist won't get through.
Exactly. Like, well, and the organic farming kind of goes along with like we've talked about GMOs and stuff before, and how like organic foods, right? The what do they call them? Like the I guess heritage kinds of seeds and stuff. That there's another term for it, but ones that haven't been modified, that are like the classic OG crops. And it's like, well, those require a lot more resources to grow and to harvest and things, and maybe also they're susceptible to certain things that GMOs wouldn't be. I mean, that is why a lot of times they're genetically modifying things, is to not to completely alter their structure, but to make them resilient and more fruitful, essentially. And that's really the goal. But people have this notion of like, they're doing mad scientist stuff and it's full of all this weird chemicals and it'll alter you and stuff. It's like, no.
Meanwhile, you look at any two fruits next to each other, one organic and the other not. The organic ones are like freakishly huge.
Yeah.
Like, why? I mean, if you really want these heritage or whatever, these like totally natural seeds, and you want to like grow a carrot, you're gonna get a carrot that big, just teeny tiny little thing, right? You aren't even going to get broccoli because that was totally genetically modified back in the day, the old school way, where you just like, breed your plants to get certain traits,
which is basically the same thing.
It is like the same thing.
The difference with like modern day genetic modification is that they're not breeding plants directly necessarily. They may be altering the DNA, but that's what happens when you selectively breed things together.
6 of one, half dozen of the other. Yeah, people are like, well, we know broccoli's healthy. Well, yeah, we've been doing it for umpteen years.
Sure.
But we didn't know it was healthy then. And people ate it, didn't give 2 shits then. They weren't like, is this broccoli organic?
Well, and that's the thing, is like the organic stuff might not be as healthy, because when you can modify things, we can modify it to have more the resources that we want that are good for us.
Yeah.
And remove the stuff that is bad for us, because not, well, organic stuff, just because it's organic doesn't mean it's safe or good for you. There's all kinds of things in nature that are super dangerous, and it's like they're still organic. That doesn't make it good. And old plants may pull things out of the soil that might not be good for us, and we can fix that. And yeah, but like, well, one of the, let's see, well, and that's a section he has in here about organic foods are healthier to eat, is one of the myths. And it goes into lots of different details about, essentially what I was saying there is that they're not necessarily healthier.
No. In fact, I once had, probably 10 years ago or more, there was this website that I had bookmarked. I don't have it anymore for some reason. If somebody can find this, please put it in the comments. It had this exhaustive list of all the fruits and vegetables and meats and everything that you can get organic, and it says whether or not it's worth it, or if it should be avoided even. The one I remember is bananas. There's no point in buying organic. You're just paying more. It's exactly the same. They're all clones.
Yep.
They're all handled the same way. They're all encased in this freaking yellow jacket, and you unzip it and eat the white bits. So
yeah.
It's just a female aardvark.
Got to have a red dwarf reference there.
I mean, I'm wearing the shirt.
Well, and like in this article, it goes into some of like how the organic pesticides are less efficient than modern synthetic ones, and some of them are much more dangerous. Like can cause Parkinson's in one of them, and
it's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah.
Stuff. There's also pesticides that are toxic to honeybees, which it's like, okay, well, it may not be toxic to us, but bees are super important. So like colony collapse syndrome or whatever, that might be partially caused by this whole organic movement. And another section says, buying organic food benefits small farmers and represents a blow to the big food corporations, which he pretty much says that that's not true.
Organic is a big food corporation.
Yeah. There's hardly any small farmers now doing organic. It's big business, and like
they can't afford to. It's actually a racket. Like you have to pay money to get your crops or your meat certified organic. And that cuts into your bottom line a lot.
Sure. And you don't have to do that with non-organic stuff.
Right.
You don't have to have it certified to not be organic. But in here, there's a little interesting blurb here. Like, California alone produces over 600 million in organic produce, most of it coming from just 5 farms, who are also the same producers of most non-organic food in the state. 70% of all organic milk is controlled by just one major milk producer. So, like, you're not sticking it to the man by buying organic.
That's funny. That's funny because remember when we did the episode way back in season 1 on the GMOs, I think we probably talked about how there was all this concern about seeds from genetically modified crops floating into the neighbors' crops and infecting their organic stuff. Well, if you've got these big corporations that are doing both, right next to each other, you got to be getting some mix there.
Oh, for sure. Well, and like you said, the fact that you have to pay a bunch of money to have it certified right there shows that only big companies can really afford that. And there are already big companies producing non-organic stuff. So they're like, oh, well, this is quite the market. Like, we could do a little bit of extra work and spend a little bit of extra money. And then now we can charge 3 times for the exact same thing, and we can push out all these little farmers that can't afford to do that.
Now, I will say, like, I haven't looked into this too deeply yet, but my wife tells me that in Germany that the requirements are a little more stringent for being organic.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that maybe the price difference isn't all that much different than the price difference in the US. So, like, it might actually be like a touch healthier, better for the environment, blah, blah, blah. Anecdotally, I do see more bees here.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's an anecdote.
Yeah.
And a very small geographical subset. But
Mm-hmm.
still, like, I mean, there might be something to be said for that. Like the way things are done here versus there.
Yeah.
There's a number of factors that go into that. But, you know, and I'm not saying it's like we shouldn't be doing things this way. Maybe more of like a hybrid situation where we don't have to like certify it and pay all this money and make it more expensive. Just like why can't you just like say, hey, I don't want the organic certification, but I'm gonna put on my label like, hey, we do this, we do this, we do this,
Yeah.
like,
List
you
your
know,
farming methods essentially.
better for the environment, blah blah blah. I mean, I'm sure they probably limit you on what you can claim on your labeling,
Mm-hmm.
but there's ways around that. There's
Well,
always
like I said, you don't have to necessarily state the conclusions. You
mm-hmm.
can state your methodology. You can say, "Hey,
Just the
here,
facts. Yeah.
yeah, list these are the pesticides we use by name. Here they are. This is our farming method.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and call it what you want, but this is how we do it, and you can choose to buy our stuff or not based on that analysis." That would make sense. There's no reason for certification at that point. It's like, okay, well, it's like an ingredients list essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
We
and
should start a company like Kitchen Sink Farmville Microscopy or something, and like make these like non-organic organic foods
mm-hmm.
and sell
Yeah,
them for like super cheap price.
exactly. Well, and I get the point. Like, I get where people are coming from with the idea, because it does. I could see how a person could look at the way things are and come to the conclusion that it's like potentially hazardous, especially in the last, say, 100 years. Our experience has been that science and technology and chemistry and stuff, while it's yielded a lot of marvelous things, has also yielded some pretty horrific things. There's a huge list of stuff that people thought was perfectly fine, that was like a modern marvel, and then it turns out, oh shit, this is like this is killing us.
Yeah.
The list hasn't ended. I mean, there's new ones being added as we go, because we keep innovating and keep changing things. But I could see how somebody would be like, hey, maybe we've gone too far. Maybe I don't want to ingest these things that are made in a lab. Like, I guess I could see that. Maybe people, even though it's not really true, they might believe like, oh, the old ways were better and it was safer and healthier and stuff like that, because people were healthier or whatever, which is not true.
No.
Like,
No.
the lifespans have pretty much gone up over the course of time. I mean, 40 was really old. Back in the 1800s, you're pretty old if you live to 40 or 50 or something like that. And now it's like, oh, that's like middle age.
Yeah. I mean, well, why don't we talk about lab grown food for a moment? Because that really is like kind of the way to go, because not only are you making a huge step down in your carbon footprint as far as like vast swaths of flat land for all these crops and whatnot, but and cruelty to animals and all this stuff, but you're basically standardizing a method that can be way more portable, way more accessible than farmland. Like,
Yeah.
mountainous regions where farms are like 50 miles away or whatever,
Mhm.
like, and you gotta like cart all that food in islands, middle of the Sahara Desert, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you can have a lab and make food in it.
Well,
Like,
yeah. Like, I think now grains might be a little less of an issue, or I guess less advantageous to be lab grown, but certainly meats. And meats are the one that really freaks people out.
yeah,
You
there's
know,
going to be
this idea of,
diminishing returns on certain things. Yeah,
yeah, but like meat, yeah, you're right. Like that, you don't necessarily need an animal to be raised and then slaughtered.
Mhm.
You can create this stuff in a lab and essentially grow the meat. I
Yeah,
mean, and this is the thing that I think people don't get is that it is actual, like it's the same stuff.
yeah.
It's made of
But
the
you
same
can leave
materials.
out the harmful bacteria, the blood,
Yep.
like all of it. Like,
And the like, you know, potential for harming animals or making them not feel good. Uh,
yeah,
you know, that kind of thing. Now, granted, I could see a downside if that became kind of the dominant method of meat production, in that one of the things, like, you know, so farming animals keeps those animals around. Like like for instance, right now, today, chickens will never go extinct, like, because there's like billions of chickens all over the place in farms, and they keep making more
well,
chickens.
yeah.
um
But like, what about the free chickens? You know, like how many of those are there? Yeah,
well, probably not that many.
they're all in Hawaii.
Yeah,
I can tell you that.
in people's backyards and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But you know, there is something to be said for preservation of a species by farming. That like the buffalo, for instance, that's a really good example. Back in the day, in the
Mhm.
1800s, people in the US would just kill buffalo for fun, shooting them out of trains, and buffaloes almost went extinct. There were hardly any left, and now
Mhm.
there's a they're coming back because farming, because people realize, oh, buffalo meat is actually way better than beef. Like, it's better tasting, it's better for you, you know. So now there's more and more and more buffalo out there, and we've actually kind of seemingly contradictorily, like it's doesn't make sense that, like, by killing them, we're bringing back the buffalo. You know. Like,
uh, yeah, that sounds a little weird to me. Like,
well, my thought on that is like, hey, if there's an endangered species, the only thing we need to do to bring it back is eat it. Like,
but I mean, you're then killing them on
well, true,
purpose. Like,
true. I
you're
mean, certainly there are probably more humane ways of doing that,
yeah.
but that is definitely a surefire way,
Mhm.
that people, you don't really even have to
Like,
create some
there's
kind of preserve to make it happen. It'll just happen on its own because
there's
of commerce.
really no reason. Like, there's actually no reason to believe that would ever even be a threat. Like, if we were all of a sudden like, hey, we can grow chicken and beef in the lab, and pork and fish.
Mhm.
Um, well, we just stop killing the ones we already have, and we've already got billions of them.
Yeah.
So problem solved. You know, like, they're
Well,
not going to go
actually,
extinct.
the advantage there too is
Actually,
like,
would probably have a huge problem where they like it'd become Animal Farm and they try to take over or something. But
exactly. Well, at least in the case of cows and chickens, they would still be on farms, but instead of
Mhm.
producing meat, they'd be producing eggs and milk. So they'd still be around. It would just be like, oh, okay, well, they're just running around, and we just kind of harvest the stuff from them. And but we're not necessarily having to kill them.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I
to get
mean,
meat, you have to slaughter the animal.
you'll never make vegans happy, that's for sure.
Nope.
'Cause I can never understand what the problem with like eggs or honey or like any of that
Or
is.
milk.
Like these are things that like don't kill
Yeah.
animals. They actually like do this
Well,
naturally. Like,
and if you're harvesting eggs and milk, you can't mistreat those animals. Otherwise, you're going to get like a poor quality product. Like the eggs
mhm,
and the milk, you might not. You have to take care of the animal
mhm.
really well. So yeah, animals that are raised specifically for those purposes would be pretty happy. for the most part.
Yeah.
And here's another that just popped in my head thinking of like organic. There's another kind of trend that sort of parallels that, and that's free range animals, which I get it. I guess from a humanitarian standpoint, that makes sense. I could see the argument, the pro argument completely making sense. Like, okay, they have a lot of room to move. They're not packed into a tight space. But there's a con argument in that. What's that?
There's a better quality that way because of the musculature and everything.
Sure. And obviously, you're just being a better human, taking care of the animals a little bit more, giving them a better life before you slaughter them. I mean, there's that, I guess. But the con of that is that free range requires a lot of space. Like, so you can't, like, your footprint for a normal farm for like chickens, you can pack a whole bunch of chickens into a small space and it doesn't require a bunch of land, whereas free range totally does. So it's like, well, I don't know, that could have some negative environmental impacts too if we're trying to feed the world this way. How much land do we need to occupy to have everything be free range?
Right.
And it's kind of like the same thing with organic stuff, where it's like organic farming requires a lot more land.
Yeah, I can't figure a way around that one. Like,
and that's one of those things where it's like I got mixed feelings about it.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately the humanitarian side wins out in that regard. It's more important that we're taking care of the animals as best as we can. And even if it requires a little bit of environmental sacrifice, that it's probably better.
Actually, I mean, here's the thing. If we switched to lab-grown meat, the existing farmland could quite easily transition to become free-range farms, which then supplies an alternative, a competition to the lab-grown meat for the people that are freaked out by it. And they can have this better tasting, better ethical standards sort of meat available to them.
Yeah, which would probably end up being more expensive, but that's fine because we have inexpensive alternative. Well, right now it's not less expensive for lab grown meat, but if it took off and became a thing, sure. Like if it were, if there were huge factories producing like lab grown beef, it would be dirt cheap, and it would probably be very similar to regular beef. But I think you're right. Having both options available would work. And you'd probably end up with smaller farms doing the free range stuff, like smaller scale, like smaller businesses, basically. And then you'd have the big businesses making all the lab grown stuff. And I think the world would be better for it, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I become prime minister of Germany, I'm going to totally just say, hey, this is what we're going to do now. We're going to have lab grown meat and free range meat, and everyone's happy.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
Some of the free range meat can go and say they're organic and appease the hippies or whatever.
Well, I mean, I think that again, it comes back to this whole thing. Like the whole label of organic is kind of misleading.
Yeah,
that that's where I take issue with it, because it's sort of this catch-all label that you just stick on there, and people just have this kind of belief that, oh, if it has that sticker on it, it must be better.
Right. Yep.
And it's like, no, I mean, it really isn't in many different ways. I maybe it's better in certain ways, but not in all ways. It's not like the direction we should be going in the future.
I mean, again, it also just depends on what it is it's claiming to be organic. Which, like, there are things that like taste better, maybe make you feel a little better when you eat them. I'll admit I've experienced that. Like first go with cancer, I tried to, this is before I was a scientist. I tried to eat all organic until I went broke, because it's really expensive.
Oh yeah.
And despite being on chemo, I actually like felt healthier than the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it wasn't sustainable.
Sure. Maybe there's something to be argued in the organic side of things, that maybe you get a little bit more variety. Whereas the major produced stuff tends to be very homogenous and samey, like every carrot is the same. Whereas like organic carrots might be a little bit different, one carrot to another, different texture, different chemistry inside. Maybe there's an argument to be made that variety that contributes to the healthy aspect of it, because that's one thing. Like, human beings shouldn't just be consuming the exact same thing all the time. We thrive off of like having a variety of foods and materials put into us. So maybe that's, I guess, that difference could account for that. And it might be the one valuable thing about it. I kind of like that you never know quite what you're getting, and from one day to the next it could be a little bit different. Like, maybe, oh, this is the best lettuce I've ever had, and then the next it's like, that was all right.
Life is like an organic carrot. You never know what you're gonna get.
And that, to me, I guess I kind of like that. I don't want life would actually be really boring if everything was always spectacular. We need that kind of cycle of quality being kind of all over the map,
Eat organic. It might be shittier.
But maybe not. Yeah.
Were there any other glaring myths that jumped out at you?
I think it was a fairly small little article, but it's something I would encourage people to look into, like, especially if you're one who believes that organic is the way and it's all better than everything. Look into it. Like, do some real research into the facts, and don't just look for the data that reinforces what you believe, but try to look for things that counter what you believe and dig into that. And if you find contradictory information, then change your mind and maybe open your door a little bit to some non-organic stuff, because it's probably fine.
Lab-grown meat.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, why not?
Yeah, pretty much. So I wonder if we should go any further, or if this is like a good encapsulated.
Probably a nice little succinct revisit to the whole GMO organic, a little leaning more toward organic this time, because I think we spent a lot of time, I think, on the genetic modification aspects, and we covered that pretty well.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of simmered down, I think. Like, it's not that big of a thing anymore, which I'm glad about.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I think maybe more information gets out there and people start learning more about it or something.
Yeah.
I think
like the golden rice and everything, like putting vitamins that you don't have locally into the rice so you can be healthy.
Exactly.
You can't do that with organic so easily, like
no. Well, and that's, like I was saying, you can modify things to account for deficiencies that would otherwise not be possible. So yeah, I think there's definitely a place for that GMOs and non-organic things could be beneficial, especially as the population continues to increase and the demand for food increases. Like, we can't just all run on organic farming and have that work. Like, that's going to be a problem. And food already costs enough as it is, like, to add to that.
God.
Yeah. So to make it double or triple the price by forcing things to be organic, like, That's not going to happen. That's not a good idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a good ending point. But I'd like to hear people's thoughts on this. What you think and believe, and I don't know, throw in your own information or whatever arguments and things, and we'll try to address them.
Call us idiots or whatever.
Yeah.
We
or
can
chumps.
Yeah, chumps.
We're just a bunch of shills for big farming.
Big pharma.
Big farmer. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for sticking it out on the slightly shorter episode. Hopefully you enjoy it, and have a good night, good evening, good morning, whatever, good afternoon, wherever you are, whatever planet you're on. And if you're a viewer from another planet, let us know how you farm.
We farm humans.
Yeah, exactly. Oh shit. The aliens really are going to invade.
Take us to McDonald's.